Hi there, welcome back on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a great 2025, a good start to it anyway. We're going to jump right in with the topic of resentment. Now, just a quick reflection. Remember, we talk about organizational culture, the culture at large, could be small groups, could be your family, your friend circle, etc., your local community. So when we're talking about these things, they can apply across many elements of our life. But we typically gravitate to the organizational culture because that's where we try to cooperate and work productively for our customers. So, resentment. I know, right? That one's a tough one because resentment can crop up so easily, not only in our own personal lives, but our professional lives. It can be simple as not getting along with someone or maybe being put off by a manner, right? Maybe there's a perceived or actual kind of a disrespectfulness that then creates a resentment in us and then that cascades into more resentment because maybe we act a particular way we don't even know we're doing it potentially. And the resentment, boomerang, right? It's worse than triangulation. It's like triangulation times 100 because now everyone's got this real low vibrational resentment, triangle going on. And we don't want resentment. And the reason we don't want resentment, I know it would sound pretty elementary. Of course, we don't want resentment. But we have to look a little further, right? We have to go a little deeper into the layers, as we often do. Resentment creates a block. It really, if there's a resentment, I'm not hearing what someone is saying. I'm not really hearing. I'm not patient. Patience also allows us to be what? To be more present, to be more engaging. I'm blocking myself off by having resentment. And what happens is that resentment bounces in, bounces around us, and then there's a little thin level of judgment. There's this little, even if it's subtle, we might look down our nose at somebody, or vice versa. Even if it's in the moment, it might not be that you dislike someone. It may not be to that level, but there can be just enough resentment, maybe even a few instances of resentment that culminate in now misunderstandings, not seeing eye to eye. Then that becomes lack of cooperation and so on. It becomes a cascade of failure. So resentment can be very insidious. If I'm not hearing others, I'm not patient, I'm not understanding, and that judgment is interrupting our ability to innovate. Think of it like a road that gets washed out, right? It's really preventing that innovation, that creativity from flowing forward in a good way. And so that not only cuts ourselves off in an organizational setting, but just think culturally, right? There could be some resentment. Think about going through the checkout at the grocery. And if you notice that the cashier, for example, shows a little disdain or resentment toward a particular customer, it might be that the customer, flubbed something up, said something wrong, did something a little goofy. We're human, we make mistakes. But then they showed a brief blip of resentment. You could see it in their manner, you could see it in their voice, perhaps a little disgust, right? It can come through in so many ways. Well, what happens? We see that, and now we have a bit of a resentment toward that cashier because they had a resentment, even if it was, very thinly veiled. Now we've got it. And it just becomes this baton of toxicity that gets handed off, and worse so if it culminates into other more toxic behaviors and drama and so forth, right? It's essentially creating a ripple effect, and it's not helping anyone. And in an organizational setting, you need that innovation and that creativity to overcome constraints and issues and so forth, right? The challenges that we talked about in the last video. We need that energy and that thoughtfulness and our ability to focus in on the challenges so that we can overcome them for our customers. And those customers are, in the end, the very people in our own personal and professional lives, right? Our teammates, right? Other sites in an organizational fold. It could be veiled as competition even, So there's healthy competition, right, where we compete in a healthy way, and it's a high energy kind of thing. We want everybody to do their best, and that's kind of what should be growing, some competition, healthy competition. But that healthy competition can be undercut with resentment that comes in, especially if things aren't being done above board. Definitely, that resentment too can come when we aren't treated fairly. If we're treated unfairly, then what? We feel I'm justified to have resentment. Now, it is true, and it's a slippery slope. We're human beings. We need to be able to blow off some steam, to our significant others and maybe our close circle about, oh my gosh, this was a travesty, right? It was unfair, all these things, and have your moment to get it off your chest. Better so to communicate to those who you're actually potentially have that unfairness came from. That's the ideal. But the problem is that if your resentment festers, then you then become to use it as a justification. And now, at any time there's a perceived lack of fairness, right? You're a trip hammer, and if there's a perception of a lack of fairness or an actual lack of fairness, it doesn't matter either way. Now that resentment comes fluttering out, and it's a ripple effect. This is another reason why we need to be fair, right? Because we don't want to we don't want to walk on eggshells. Let's qualify this. We don't want to walk on eggshells. We want to be, have transparency, clarity, and that's ideal. But we want to try to be careful that we aren't creating an environment where unfairness can then flourish, because then that ripple of resentment then springs outward, right? So by kind of guarding ourselves in not letting ourselves fall into the trap of resentment, that's one way that we protect love, right? Because then we make conscious choices to speak with clarity and transparency. And look, it can be a difficult truth that you need to speak to someone, and that's fair. It's better to do it that way than to treat them poorly and with disdain and arrogance and so forth, just poor treatment, because that's going to incite resentment. You don't want resentment. Nobody wants resentment. But we do want to feel that we can be honest and truthful, expressing ourselves, not only professionally, but personally in our own lives. And so much of the time, especially, it depends on where you are in your family dynamic too, right? If you're the youngest, right, and now you're dealing with the oldest, or if you're the youngest, you're dealing with an elder, and all kinds of mixes of these things. What can happen is we can mistake respect and honoring, right, somebody's position in the family by not being truthful. And then what can happen is if you aren't truthful and honest, then what can happen is you build up some of that disdain and that resentment, and all of a sudden now you're acting in ways that demonstrate resentment. So this is why it's better to be honest and truthful right up front, as best you can. And it's not easy. There's times. I mean, look, I've been there myself. I'm a human being just like all of us. And there have been times where I've, capitulated to do, and take care of folks and do things for them when I really should have set a boundary, right? And not because I didn't want to do it, but because I was overloaded, right? And that's what can happen, is that we can get overloaded so many times. And then if we're not careful, then we can then grow to resent those who are taking advantage of our boundaries, or what should be boundaries that we aren't, that we don't actually have in place. So maybe we'll touch on that next time. Anyway, this is a way you can protect love, by guarding yourself against resentment. Don't let yourself become resentful. All right, folks. Hit that good domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and encourage others. And when you do that, not only are you helping to transform culture in your organizations and the community and your personal lives, but it's springing outward, and that's creating a ripple effect. And this is how we can help culture. All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.